Welcome back to Wired Up Retro. This is episode 13. We're going to be covering the PC and also game console X-Arcade Tankstick, which is a controller. It's a mega controller made for basically about any game system you can think of. Well, except for some of the really old consoles. But I'm going to show you a couple of ways that you can get it working on those old consoles today. First, I'll just introduce it to you. Basically, the Tankstick has dual joysticks, one on the right, one on the left. Obviously, there's also a trackball that's right there in the center. And the trackball, when you've got it plugged into a PC, is just basically used as the mouse for your PC. And, you know, it's great for PC gaming. If you're going to use the mouse, you can play games like Sims or, you know, etc. There's so many games you can use it with. You can even use it to, you know, play space combat type games. And also, if you're using the joysticks, you can play with a friend. Street Fighter, a variety of different kinds of fighting games are nice. 95% of the people who get a Tankstick are really going to enjoy their fighting games with it. The sticks are of good quality. I wouldn't say they are top-notch. You know, if you want HAP parts, which are known to be, you know, top-notch, you can substitute them into this console and potentially get the best arcade stick of all time. But yeah, if you're not in the 5% group that is such a discerning taste about fighting games, I think that sticks that come with it are just fine, especially if you're going to play classic video games. And we're talking like early 80s classic games with the Tankstick, and I'll be showing you a little bit about how to do that. You know, there were controller adapters made for it. There's one called the X-Arcade 5-in-1, which was a Dreamcast, GameCube, and, well, Wii, because of GameCube. That's 3. And then you've got the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 capability as well. So that makes it a 5-in-1 adapter. And it's basically going to let you use both the right and the left sticks on any of those consoles I just mentioned. There's also a PlayStation 3 and original Xbox adapter, and that's a dual adapter. It's called the 2-in-1 X-Arcade adapter. There's also one specifically made for the Xbox 360 by that company, and there's one made for the PS4. There's also one made for the Xbox One, and another specific one for the Wii U game console. So a lot of different choices. You can use it, if you keep buying adapters, you can use it on about anything that was released post-1995. Now, there are some adapters that should have been made for it, but weren't made for it. The pre-1995 consoles, and I'll just run through those real quick. The Atari 2600, Atari 5200, Atari 7800, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super NES, as well as the ColecoVision, and even Jaguar and 3DO, and don't forget the Master System, the Sega Genesis. Wow, there's so many here. Commodore 64, Atari 8-bit computers. You know, I'm really here to talk about the Atari consoles, and you can use the following adapters hooked up together to play Atari 2600 games on your vintage console. And this also includes Sega Master System and Genesis and Atari 7800, Atari 8-bit computers, and Commodore 64. So to get those systems, and I'm mainly just saying if you're an Atari fan, want to play 2600 games, you're going to want to purchase an X-Arcade 5-in-1 adapter, that first one I mentioned, which is both PS1 and PS2 compatible, and use those hookups to connect it to what's called a Tototech PlayStation 1 or 2 to Genesis adapter. And those are available on Tototech's website, T-O-T-O-T-E-K. And then you're going to have to buy a third adapter, which is available at the Best Electronics website. And that one, I'll leave a link below in the description for where to buy those particular adapters. This is called the Sega Genesis Controllers to Atari Systems Adapter Cable. So if you buy that, which I think is right around $12, and the Tototech one runs around maybe 20-ish, 25-ish after shipping, and the X-Arcade 5-in-1 might run you around $30 to, I don't know, $30 probably shipped. You put all three of them together and you've got yourself one-button games on any of those consoles I mentioned working with this tank stick. I'm showing you a little bit of footage of Mountain King being played with the tank stick. I'm using the stick on the left to enjoy the game. It's working just great with these, and very little, if any, lag. I would say I wasn't noticing lag. I don't notice lag with the Tototech when playing these classic games. Now, if you're playing Street Fighter and you're a aficionado of the fighting game, there could potentially be a couple of milliseconds, and some people actually notice things like that. So, yeah, you just be aware. If you're in the 5% group, you might, not like the Toto or the X-Arcade Tankstick, but most people aren't going to notice any lag, and I'm one of them. All right, now for the two-button games on the Atari 7800, you substitute the best electronics adapter with an Aladdin 78 or Seagull 78 adapter, and I've discussed that in video number 1. So if you want to know more about that adapter, you can go there. I'll also put a link in the description on where you can obtain the Aladdin Seagull 78 adapter if you're an Atari 7800 fan. Now, if you're into Atari 5200, and obviously you've seen some of my episodes, hopefully, and you've noticed that I like my Atari 5200 quite a bit. I'm showing a little footage here of Berzerk being played with the tank stick. The way you hook it up is basically a little more expensive than maybe what some would like, because this involves using not only the X-Arcade 5-in-1 adapter with using those PS1 and PS2 connectors, also that Tototech PlayStation 1 or 2 to Genesis adapter, which was on the other one as well. But you're also going to add in a MasterPlay interface clone. And on Wired Up Retro number 5 discussed that particular adapter in depth. It is a very high quality adapter. It's made by a fan at Atari Age, the website, and he's also an eBay seller at times. Sometimes he is, and sometimes you won't see him there. But you can reach him through Atari Age if you're interested in having a MasterPlay interface clone made up for yourself. They can run between $80 and $90 depending on how you want it set up. But it basically, there's details on how to obtain that in Wired Up Retro number 5. Yeah, you're going to spend quite a bit of money adding up all those adapters just to get the 5200 games working. But believe you me, it's a good a good result. So if you're interested in dual games, let's say Robotron 2084, there's a version of that made on the 5200. And wow, you'd have to buy 2 MasterPlay interface clones, and you'd have to buy 2 Tototech PS1 to Genesis adapters. And yeah, when all is said and done, that gets mighty expensive just to play Robotron or the other 2 joystick game called Space Dungeon. But on the Atari 7800, that wouldn't be as costly. Because you're just going to be buying that Best Electronics $12 adapter called the Sega Genesis Controllers to Atari Systems adapter cable. So anyway, if you want to play Robotron 2084, get yourself an Atari 7800 and enjoy it on that console with the tank stick. That's the best way to do it. Just unless you got money coming out your ears, then yeah, I guess you could get it on the 5200 and enjoy it that way. Now, speaking of the Atari 5200, I would like to thank my friends at the Atari 5200 podcast, Dave Protestari and Captain Bob, as well as their new co-host, Glenn Planamento, for having me on their show as a guest. Each of their podcasts are really well worth a listen if you were at all into classic 80s video gaming. They are highly entertaining. It was really an honor to talk about the 5200 controllers with them on their first podcast and also on their third one. And they're really some quality people, so be sure to check out the podcast and also check out Glenn Planamento's YouTube channel. While you're at it, he has some really interesting videos that pertain to the kind of stuff that we talk about on my channel. So I'm sure you'll enjoy him as well. If you haven't checked it out, definitely give it a shot. Now, getting back to the topic at hand, I did want to mention more about those dual joystick games. For the Atari 2600, there were a number of them made, actually, where you're using two joysticks and maybe the button on the left controller and the button on the right controller to play those games. So I'll go into a little bit of what games those are. So you have Radar Lock and also Riddle of the Sphinx, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Spy Hunter, Stargate, which is also known as Defender 2, as well as Solaris and Video Life, which is a little more of an obscure and rare game that's worth, you know, quite a bit of money if you happen to have your hands on that one. The ones that I really favor are the games that are really top quality action games. Stargate would be a good example of a two joystick game that's great for the Atari Tankstick or the X-Arcade Tankstick on your Atari 2600. So yeah, it has you using the left joystick for controlling your ship and firing their main fire button, your main weapon. But the right joystick has controls for smart bombs and VSO and hyperspace. So your hands will stay plenty busy controlling that game with the tank stick. In fact, it might be a little too challenging in my opinion. Now, another game I've enjoyed is the game Spy Hunter. And in that game, you're going to use the right side button for smoke screens and oil slicks. It's definitely not quite as challenging to use those buttons. Obviously, you only have two actions going on there with the right-hand side. So, yeah, I would say Spy Hunter might be a little bit better dual joystick game. But the pinnacle of dual joystick gaming really is Robotron 2084, and they didn't make that for the Atari 2600. There may be a homebrew game that's kind of like it, but you know, as far as I know, Robotron not made for the 2600. You have to get an Atari 7800 if you're going to enjoy that, and I would use maybe one of those best electronics adapters as well as a Tototech, and on the right-hand joystick you got to buy another Tototech. So yeah, definitely that is where it's at, Robotron 2084. You want to get that if you're going to be playing on a Atari game system with two joysticks, that's for sure. All right, so in the last episode, I had mentioned that today we're going to go forward with the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox, and talk a little bit about the dual joystick tank stick on those consoles. If you're going to play on the PlayStation 2, you have a couple choices. You know, basically get that 5-in-1 adapter to use the joysticks. And you can actually put this tank stick into dual shock mode so that the right and left sticks can be put into action. And I'm showing the Atari Anthology being used with the dual joysticks on the tank stick for the game Black Widow. And that game Black Widow, two joysticks in action, it's a whole lot of fun. You do have to press two special buttons on the X-Arcade to put it into dual shock mode, but it's very simple, and you know, all you gotta do is to look at the manual when you buy it, and there is actually an online manual as well to show you how to do it. It's actually pretty simple. All right, another way to use the tank stick on your PlayStation 2 is to actually utilize the Smart Joy Frag for the PlayStation 2. That's option number 1. Or you can use the Smart Joy Frag for the Xbox, the original Xbox, in conjunction with an XP Joy box. And I talked a little bit about that in our last episode. That's the way I use it to play PlayStation 2 games, such as let's say Rez or even Missile Command on the Atari Anthology. Yeah, lots of fun on the PlayStation 2 to be had. Now, another thing I want to mention is that on the Xbox with the tank stick adapter, you can also play Atari Anthology. They made a version on the Xbox, and here I'm showing some footage of Battlezone, which you can use both sticks to play, and you're going to end up pushing up on one and down on the other to make your tank turn, and then you're going to have to tap one button with a finger to fire your button once you got things lined up. So it'd actually be a little bit nicer if the buttons were on the sticks, but you can play the game with just a little, finagling and pressing buttons. Now, if you really want to play it with joysticks that are dual analog and buttons on the stick, which is the way it would be ideal to play, you're going to want to go back to PlayStation 1 and play it there. And on that console, there is such a thing as a dual analog controller made by Sony, and it's some people call it the dual analog flight sticks, but the official name is dual analog joystick. So you can get that and use it for specific PlayStation 1 games that were made for it, such as on this compilation disc, the game Battlezone. And you can also use it to play Robotron X for the PlayStation 1. Unfortunately, this is a special mode for PlayStation 1 specific games that were made for that. And all these games were made before the DualShock came out. So the Tankstick, the X-Arcade company didn't really program it to be compatible with that kind of mode. So you're going to have to buy that Sony product if you want to do that. But I have good news. If you don't want to spend the big bucks to buy that dual analog joystick, you can actually buy a dual analog gamepad made by Sony in, I believe, 1996. This was made right before the Dual Shock came out. This one doesn't have motors inside, but it actually has a, when you push this button, it puts it into a green light mode, which is the dual analog joystick mode. And then if you press it again, it puts it into dual shock mode. Unfortunately, again, no motors inside. But you can use this to play Robotron X or Battlezone with the two sticks. Another joystick or controller that actually has rumble in it that actually does what this does is called the Barracuda 2. There was a Barracuda 1, doesn't have rumble motors, but the Barracuda 2 does. So you might want to invest in that, or the Sony, the big joysticks. All right. So anyway, back to the X-Arcade. I do want to touch a little bit on the Xbox console using the Trackball. Okay. So to use the Trackball, you're going to use the Smart Joy frag made for the original Xbox. And, once you, I'm going to show you the map out of when you've got that plugged in. There it is. That'll show you what buttons represent what on the game controller. So that does come in handy. It's a little random-ish as to where they put the buttons on the console, but it does work. Anyway, I wanted to show you some Fusion Frenzy. This is a game where you're rolling around some balls and, spinning the ball actually works on this. It's kind of fun. And you can play Centipede. You can also play Panzer Dragoon, which is really fun to play with this X-Arcade Tankstick. All right, so we're coming down the home stretch, and I've covered a lot of information today, whether you're considering getting a tank stick for your Atari 2600 or 7800, even your 5200. We've covered a lot of information about the classic systems, and also PlayStation 2 and Xbox. And if you are going to hook that Smart Joy frag with your tank stick up to your either original Xbox or PlayStation 2 with the proper adapter or adapters, you're going to need a keyboard connected. And the Smart Joy frag is interesting. It is set up so that the right thumbstick, when you initially plug it in, it's innately set to do right thumbstick action, okay? And I think they did this for the sake of first-person shooter fans. But if you choose not to want to play the games, let's say the kind of games I play, with a right thumbstick, but you want to use a left thumbstick because that's the way most games like the ones I was playing are set up, you need to switch that. And there's a mode switch that basically is done by pressing escape and insert, okay? And if you want to go back to, and that puts it on the left stick. If you want to go back to right stick, you press escape and delete on the keyboard. So hopefully you'll keep that in mind. If you plug it all in and it's not working, that's probably the reason why. It's the way the Smart Joy frag is innately set up, but you can switch it around.
All right, so next episode we're going to be covering the original Xbox that's modded so that we can play some emulators, not only with the Tankstick, but with a couple other interesting controllers that maybe you aren't even aware of, that can do things like play Atari 2600 paddle games, Atari 2600 trackball games, and 5200 paddle and trackball games as well on emulators. So I'm sure this will be an exciting episode for those of you who are interested in classic gaming. So I look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, signing off.